The format is going to be exactly the same tonight, okay? But before I start, I'm going to introduce Jose, who, do we have anybody here, Jose, you need to translate for or not? Well, come on up. Anyway, doesn't matter. And you'll be tested right after he's done.
Buenas tardes, si ustedes necesitan interpretación en español, yo voy a estar en la parte de atrás y voy a estar utilizando los dispositivos de interpretación simultánea. Pueden acudir conmigo y yo les puedo ayudar por allá. Gracias.
So, before I go through the agenda, again, first of all, I want to say, again, we know this is a very challenging process, all right? We know that people are emotional about this. The great part about our district is people love their schools. All right? The hard part is, as a growing district, we have to look at our boundaries. And Dana, the new superintendent, will talk about that in a little bit. But I will remind you, for those of you who live out here and maybe have children at Glacier Creek or at Park, the last time we did a comprehensive change of boundaries in this district was 1996. Why did we do it in 96? Because this school opened and because Sunset Ridge opened. We've done 4 smaller boundary changes since then, but we have not had to look at them. And for those of you who remember when I was doing referendum presentations, we have grown as a district in that time from 4,800 students to more than 7,500. I mean, it's just, that's why the referendum passed. I think it's why it passed with 70% and why there's a new elementary school going up. But it does mean having these difficult conversations. So the way it's going to work tonight is the superintendent's going to kind of walk you through how we got to the point where we needed to get a committee together to look at boundaries. And then Mark Roffers of MD Roffers Consulting is going to take you through the presentation and take you through the work that the committee has done since the Board of Education approved them having a committee in February and they started meeting in March. And then after that, we want to hear from you. Now, on Monday night, I saw people who brought in speeches that looked like they would go on for 10 minutes. And we're not doing any of that speaking tonight, and we didn't do it Monday night either. But if you brought something like that, turn it in. That feedback will be shared with the committee. If not, that is perfectly fine too. We have forms that separate the 3 remaining options, and we want you to tell us what you like, what you don't like, and what questions you might still have about any of them. And that feedback will be shared as well. And one other thing I will make clear to everybody is that if for some reason you can't fill those forms out tonight, or you don't want to, or you have friends who couldn't make it tonight but you want them to provide feedback, remind them to go to our online form. We've had about up to 170, 175 responses now. All of the feedback we get by November 1st will be shared with the committee at its November 6th meeting. There is a plan for one more meeting after that, and we'll share feedback between as well. But again, we do want to hear from people. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dana, and she'll move it on from here.
Thanks, Barry. Good evening. Thank you so much for taking time to be with us tonight. We really appreciate you, and we hope that this session is really informative. We had excellent feedback after Monday's presentation, so hopefully we'll hit the mark tonight with all of you as well. As Perry mentioned, the reason that we are here is because we are growing. In fact, we've gained about 1,300 students since 2012, which is about 100 kids per grade level, if you think about it. So we are a destination district. This is good news. People want to be here, and one of the reasons they come is because our schools are so wonderful. So that's a good thing. So why do we have to change? Well, we have a 7th elementary school that's going to be opening in the fall, Pope Farm Elementary School. And we also have some schools that are currently over capacity, and we have some schools that are at or under capacity. So this process really is giving us the opportunity to balance enrollment across all 7 of those schools. In fact, I learned in advance of the referendum last November, it was foreshadowed if the referendum had failed, we would still be doing this process because West Middleton is really overcrowded. Good news, we passed the referendum, which is excellent, and now we have to figure out how we're going to fill up our new elementary and then also balance enrollment across the other 6. So not only are we thinking about our 7 elementary schools, But we're also needing to think about our middle schools. And our boundary committee members are starting to have these conversations right now. And in fact, there are some boundary members here, I believe. You can just raise your hand, members of the committee. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We appreciate that. We also have some capacity concerns and questions in both of our middle schools. Glacier Creek is currently above capacity, and Cromery is under capacity. So again, we have some opportunity to balance enrollments there. Transportation, bus transportation, has also been a consistent topic of conversation throughout this entire process, because we are always looking at the length of bus routes, how many kids are on bus routes, and that also has been a factor and a topic of discussion. All right, so our process for this has really started in February of 2019, and 25 community members stepped forward to be a part of the process, and they have spent a lot of time together. They've met 12 times, and they have thoughtfully vetted 21 different scenarios. At first blush, you might think this would be kind of a relatively simple process. It is anything but that. And so they have really spent a lot of time thinking very carefully about how to do this and how to bring forward some great recommendations to our school board. So we've gotten a lot of feedback throughout this entire process. Perry mentioned that. We've received emails, we've received petitions, we've received a lot of information via the online portal. The committee has been given all of that feedback in both written form and also electronically. So the voice of the community has definitely been heard and shared with the people who are making the recommendations. The process is coming to a close. And so we'll have a few more meetings with our committee, and then a recommendation or a small handful of recommendations will come forward to our school board for discussion in December. And we're hopeful to have a decision made as early as December, potentially in January. At the outset of the process, these were the criteria that the school board put before the committee through its charge, and these are listed in order of importance. These are the criteria that the committee has been using to vet those 21 options. It'll also be the criteria that our school board uses when they consider the recommendations and make their final decisions. So projected enrollment and building utilization, addressing barriers to student and family engagement, neighborhood unity, duration of boundaries and minimizing impact on kids, fiscal responsibility, elementary to middle school feeders, continuous attendance areas, and then district transportation efficiency. All right, so again, tonight you are going to hear a lot of really good, detailed, specific information from Mark. A little bit more about the process, but a lot of detail about the 3 scenarios that seem to have a lot of support at the present time from our committee. And then after Mark does his presentation, there'll be an opportunity for you to walk about and ask some questions. Members of our district level team will be here to answer any questions you might have, and you'll be able hopefully to get the questions that you brought tonight answered. So I'll turn it over to Mark with all of the good detail.
Thank you, Dana. Good evening. My name is Mark Rothers. I have been working with the district on a few different projects over the last few years. I'm an urban planner by training, and I've done this kind of work for a few other school districts in the suburban Madison area over the last couple of years. I'm going to talk a little bit first about where we stand today with current conditions and where we think the district may be going in terms of how many kids it may be educating 5-10 years from now. So I mentioned I'm an urban planner. That means I work with maps a lot. I realize many of you work with maps not at all. So I have to always kind of train and retrain myself to remember that. So you're going to see maps like this tonight. You probably have seen maps on the internet or elsewhere. But what this map represents is the current extent of the Middleton-Cross Plains District. I think Perry mentioned there's 8 different municipalities within the district. It's not just Middleton and Cross Plains, but also several others. The different colors on this map represent the current school attendance areas for each of the schools. So I'll just pick one. Blue, where we are right now, those areas currently attend Park Elementary School. The other thing that's on the bottom but not represented on the map is how the current feeder structure works between elementary and middle schools. And it works fairly well right now because we have 6 elementary schools feeding 2 middle schools. 6 divided by 2 equals 3, a nice even number. That'll change with Pope Farm. And generally speaking, the eastern, or the western and the southern parts of this map attend Glacier Creek, where we are tonight. The other things you'll see on this map, and what if you haven't become accustomed to, you will shortly, is these smaller black lines. They represent what we call neighborhoods. There's 78 different neighborhoods or smaller areas that we've subdivided the district into. We've done that for a variety of purposes, to be able to analyze trends that are occurring in student populations in that area, to make projections within small areas of relatively homogeneous housing types. And as this process suggests, these neighborhoods have become the building blocks for constructing different options for how attendance areas might change. So you'll see the different neighborhoods change different colors in the options that I'm going to be sharing here this evening. Oh, and one other thing, so there's a neighborhood number in each of these. You're going to see on all the maps here tonight a second number. That's our projected 2025 elementary school enrollment within that particular neighborhood. One of the things to point out and that suggests the kind of far-reaching impacts of the Pope Farm decision is on this map here. Within a quarter mile of this new school at Pope Farm, there's currently 3 different school attendance areas. The area in, the arrow points to the Pope Farm site. The west side of the Blackhawk neighborhood in purple currently attends Sauk Trail. The east side of Blackhawk, east of Bear Claw Way, currently attends Sunset Ridge. Together, there's over 200 elementary students within those 2 neighborhoods today. So, you know, it's common to think Pope Farm's relieving West Middleton, but it's doing much more than that, and the changes that we are kind of exploring have implications well beyond those 2 schools. Dana talked about the enrollment growth, so that Harry, this is a visual reminder of how the district has grown in total enrollment over the last 10-year period at all grade groups, at all levels. We have been charged as part of our work to help the district say, well, are those trends going to continue? And if so, which neighborhoods are going to experience the most growth and which are not? So in a broad brush, we're projecting about 3,300 new housing units over the next 10 plus years. That's about 290 new houses, new housing units, sometimes apartments, sometimes condos each year in your district. That translates to over 500 more elementary school students over that period. That's about the size of an elementary school here today. And about 231 more middle school students. So in addition to adjusting attendance areas to accommodate today's population or next year's population, the committee has looked at how do we make sure we're creating a system of attendance areas that works well beyond that. And if you want to learn more about our projections, how we did it, you can come see me tonight. You can come see Colette Spranger, who did much of the work on our projections after the presentation, or you can visit the webpage for the report. So what do the projections have to do with our attendance area boundary effort? Well, certainly a lot of that projected enrollment growth is going to be close to West Middleton and Pope Farm. So we have certainly worked hard to balance attendance areas between those 2 schools. But we have other schools that are more distant from those 2 that are expected to have capacity issues based on community growth. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, and they include Park and certainly Glacier Creek. And really, as the committee has really started to dive into middle school attendance areas and how they might change, looking at kind of rebalancing between Glacier Creek and Crown Marie is a big part of the discussion. All right, so I have to share with you 3 different options for elementary school attendance areas. They are represented in different ways, and what they are is different potential approaches for how neighborhoods will be assigned to elementary schools starting next year. We present them via maps, kind of like the background map that I showed you a little bit earlier, and we have projected enrollment and different other statistics for each school under each scenario. We have 3 different options to present. They're named A1, D3.1, and D3.7, kind of weird. But they're named that way because they're variations of the original, of 2 of the original options, A through D. And in the case of option D, they're actually variations to variations of those original options. So I'm going to start with elementary option A1, and during that process tell you a little bit about some of the thinking that went into crafting all 3 of the options that you're going to be seeing here tonight. So in overview, option A1 establishes a Pope Farm attendance area that includes all of Black Hawk neighborhoods. Remember those 24 and 25 that currently go to Sauk Trail and Sunset Ridge. Most of the Elderberry area to the south of Old Sauk Road and south of that new school, and some subdivisions within the town of Middleton. Option A1 also consolidates neighborhoods at the district's far southeast edge in the Gammon Road, McKenna area, all at West Middleton. And you can start to see the neighborhood numbers start to kind of rear their heads here. So that all these neighborhoods have a number, and those are the southeast ones. We've got tweaks to Northside and Elm Lawn within option A1. And option A1, like the others, shifts some current West Middleton and Park elementary neighborhoods to Sunset Ridge. And in addition, shifts some neighborhoods in the city of Middleton to Sauk Trail. And this is all about this rebalancing thing that Dana introduced here this evening. So you bear with me with these next 2 slides because I think they're, again, important to get your arms around in terms of, well, why are they messing with my school and my attendance area? So first, and this might have been more relevant to the meeting Monday night, why the shifts associated with Sauk Trail in all 3 options? Well, as I alluded to earlier, the west side of Black Hawk currently has about 80 elementary school students. Those students will be within walking distance of the new school. The committee in all the options said, you know, it makes sense to get those students to be able to walk to the new school rather than transporting them across town. So, but if the district only did that, only assigned those kids in that neighborhood to Pope Farm from Sauk Trail, what would happen is that the enrollment at Sauk Trail would decrease to about 280 students, well under the capacity of that school, and kind of challenging the functioning of that school. And in addition to that, the percentage of kids at that school that were to be eligible for free and reduced lunch would go up considerably and be much higher than any other school within the district. So the different options explore, well, what can we kind of do about that? They seek new neighborhoods to kind of take the place of the west side of Black Hawk, and those neighborhoods ideally have 2 or more of the characteristics on the bottom of the screen there. They're either closer or close to the same distance to Sauk Trail than their currently assigned elementary school. They have comparable income characteristics to the neighborhood that would be going to Pope Farm on the west side of Black Hawk. And they're either at or near the district's edge or have limited connectivity to other neighborhoods in the area. What I mean by that is few roads, few walkways to kind of link them to other neighborhoods that are in the Middleton-Cross Plains district. Another question that I'm sure many of you have is, you know, why the shifts between Sunset Ridge and Park in all 3 options? So all 3 options that are being presented tonight have changes to the Park Elementary attendance area and to Sunset Ridge. Well, the east side of Black Hawk, again, they currently attend Sunset Ridge. They have 130 K through 4 students plus or minus within that particular area. Within all three options, they're assigned to Pope Farm. They're within, some of them are within walking distance of Pope Farm. They're otherwise very close to that school. But if the district only removed neighborhood 24 from Sunset Ridge without replacing it with other neighborhoods, enrollment there would be reduced by about a quarter of its current enrollment at Sunset Ridge, and the school would be operating at less or more than 100 kids under its capacity. Meanwhile, given our projections, and if we didn't change attendance area boundaries, Parks enrollment is projected to exceed the capacity of that school building before the year 2025. We have 3 new Village of Cross Plains subdivisions that have been approved and are scheduled to break ground, at least 2 of them next year, including a number of new housing units. New housing units, new single-family houses mean more kids. So we expect that will translate to a greater population at the nearby Park Elementary School. Excuse me. All right, back to the option. This is a map that represents the option. So it's similar in some ways, but different in others. And I see some of you already squinting or trying to lean forward to study this particular map. I can tell you that it's on boards in the back of the room, so you'll have a chance to get 2 inches from it if you need to later on. Broadly speaking, again, just as a reminder, what option A1 does is it consolidates all of the southeast neighborhoods in the school district near Woodman's, that area off the Beltline, to West Middleton. In order to do that, because if you remember, West Middleton's got a capacity issue, we would need to pull other neighborhoods away from West Middleton. Some of those logically go to Pope Farm. That's the tan area on this map in the center where I'm circling right now. In option A1, several of those neighborhoods get shifted over to Sunset Ridge, south of Highway 14 in the Old Sauk Mineral Point corridor in the town of Middleton. How can that happen? Sunset Ridge is at capacity. Remember that those 130 students in the east side of Blackhawk would no longer go to Sunset Ridge. So that's how that's allowed. So those are the main and primary changes. The other ones that affect Park is there's a few neighborhoods on the kind of frontier, I suppose, between Park and Sunset Ridge that would shift over from Park to Sunset Ridge, thereby sort of rebalancing and alleviating some projected capacity issues at Park. Remember, the number 1 criteria was try to achieve efficient building utilization. So for each of these options, and again, you can study this information will be at each of the tables if you don't already have it, but in front of you it's also on the district's webpage. This is the projected enrollment to the capacity of the 7 elementary schools that'll be in place next year. This is the current enrollment, at least from 2019. This is the next columns represent projected enrollment, projected number of students in 3 different time intervals from 2020 to 2030. And then the final column is the capacity of each, the maximum capacity of each school. And where you see the red numbers, that means that the projected enrollment to capacity, there's more kids than capacity at that school. What the committee was able to do after kind of winnowing through many options is at least get the projected 2025 enrollment to below the capacity of each of the 7 schools. We have other statistics, as I mentioned, for each option. For option A1, these are our estimates of free and reduced lunch percentages, English language learners, and students of color, based on the assumptions that the attendance area changes occurred today. So they're based on the current mix of students within the district. Other stats for option A1. 28% of the elementary students would change, again, if we snapped our fingers and made the changes today. You'll see that's higher than the other 2 options that are going to be presented tonight. They're in the 18% range. About half of those changes would be students going to Pope Farm Elementary. That means almost half of them would be going to a different school in option A1. The good news with all of these options is students would be attending schools that were closer to them. 83% of our projected 2025 students would attend the closest geographic school as the crow flies. Parts of Black Hawk and neighborhood 16E would shift from busing zones to walking zones. 16E is in where Cromrie is located. On the flip side, option A1 would require more busing. To get, in particular, the neighborhoods in the town of Middleton that would shift to Sunset Ridge over to that school, you'd have to organize and get more buses going there. There's just not a lot of direct routes to get between the west side of the town of Middleton and Sunset Ridge. So that's the first of three options. So I already saw in the room those of you that grimaced when option A1 was presented. So hopefully we can find something a little bit more palatable as we go forward here. For that group at least, but I know another set will be scowling at me. Option D 3.1. This is the second option that, again, the committee recommended forward here tonight. It establishes a Pope Farm attendance area that includes all of Black Hawk, the Elderberry area in your district going to Pope Farm. Unlike the other two options, it doesn't change attendance areas within the district's southeast corner, that Gammon Road, McKenna Boulevard area. It incorporates some modest shifts for Elm Lawn, Sunset Ridge, and Park, and you'll see those on the map. And it has a particular neighborhood that shifts to Sauk Trail to compensate for the shift of neighborhood 25 away from Sauk Trail, and that's neighborhood 7. It's the North Lake subdivision within the city of Middleton. This is the map that relates to this particular option. Again, much of what I just described is represented on the map. The common boundary between Park and Sunset Ridge does change, particularly in the northwest corner of the district, with those schools or those neighborhoods proposed for shift to Sunset Ridge within that particular option. Option 3.1 also achieves projected enrollment to building capacity balance through 2025. In other words, we don't have any schools projected to exceed their capacity. If we didn't make some of the shifts related to Park, this 338 number would be in the 360s based on our projections. Diversity stats for this option, again, you can explore these in greater detail at the different tables where they'll be presented and at home, online if you like. Other statistics related to D 3.1, about 19% of the students would change schools under this option if we snapped our fingers and made that change today. Over 2/3 of those would go to Pope Farm. The statistics for attending closest school are similar. We've got some walking zone benefits and, again, compared to A1, a little bit more efficient busing possible in D 3.1. The third and final option that I'll present here tonight is labeled D 3.7. In overview, D 3.7's Pope Farm attendance area is exactly the same as D 3.1. The main difference between D 3.1 and D 3.7, again, they're all in the D family, so they should be quite similar, is to compensate for that shift of neighborhood 25 near Pope Farm from Sauk Trail to the new elementary school. Option D 3.7 shifts neighborhood 68 and 69. That's, for those of you who don't speak in my code, that's the Applewood Hill, High Point Estates, and other neighborhoods in the southeast corner of the district. They would go to Sauk Trail in option D 3.7. And then in addition, there are also small shifts, sometimes a little bit different than 3.1, of other neighborhoods among different schools to achieve balancing, more efficient transportation, and other of the criteria. This is the map associated with D 3.7. And again, you see these boundaries kind of shifting a little bit, very subtle in this particular option, but these are the two southeast neighborhoods that they currently attend Elm Lawn under this option D 3.7. They would go to Sauk Trail instead. That's the main difference between 3.7 and 3.1, although there are other differences. Our projected enrollment to capacity of the schools in D3.7 is very similar to D3.1, and again achieves that projected enrollment to capacity balance through the year 2025 at least. And these are the projected statistics related to the free and reduced lunch, English language learners, and students of color. The other statistics for D3.7 in terms of who's moving where are nearly identical to D3.1. I won't spend a lot of time on this slide, but I'm happy at any point after our presentation, if you want to come up and see me, I'm happy to bring back slides and go through them in greater detail. All right, if that wasn't enough information, we have to discuss middle schools. And the committee has had in the back of their minds over the last several months what happens to middle schools. And there's a very close relationship to elementary schools. And if we got too deep into middle schools, before we winnowed from the 21 elementary schools, we would all look like me on top. And so what we've done through this process is got down to these 3 elementary areas, and now we've started to say, well, how could we pair middle school scenarios where kids go to different middle schools on top of those? So we have to get at a couple of key questions first. With an uneven number of elementary schools, the first question is, will we have to split students from one elementary school into 2 middle schools? And the second question is, how much should we be thinking about a future 3rd middle school at the Pope Farm site? And I want to talk about those 2 questions first before talking about what options exist for middle school attendance areas. First off, will we have to split students from one elementary school into 2 middle schools? And the corollary question is, why not send 4 elementary schools to Cromery and 3 to Glacier Creek, or 4 to Glacier Creek and 3 to Cromery, and be done with it? Well, neither middle school has nearly the capacity for this arrangement. We just have elementary schools with anywhere from 300 to 500, 600 kids. To do it 4-3 just doesn't work with the sizes of those schools. So it suggests that we need to look at least one of the current elementary schools where some of the kids would go to one middle school and some of the kids would go to another. What are we concerned about? Some of the goals there are at the bottom. Let's send a large enough group of students from each elementary school to each middle school. So we don't have a situation where 10 students from this elementary school go to Cromery and the other 200 go to Glacier Creek. So the second question I had up on the screen there is, how much should we be thinking about a future 3rd middle school at the Pope Farm site, which is an interesting kind of question. So we know that our projected middle school enrollment is going to exceed the capacity of our 2 middle schools combined, probably next year. And we also know that Pope Farm, the site, has room for a 3rd middle school to the south of where the elementary school is being built. But in order to get that 3rd middle school built, the voters in your district would have to approve another referendum. Even before a referendum could be put on the ballot, there's time needed to prepare for and communicate about a referendum, just like Perry talked about earlier. And then if a referendum is approved, assume at least 2 years between that approval and opening day when the kiddos could take occupancy of that new middle school. So that's 5 years from now. So what that means, because students are in middle school for 4 years, right, is that no single students will have to change middle schools twice regardless of what we do with attendance areas today. Because of that fact, the difficulty of layering another kind of factor with this 3rd middle school, we're advising that a 3rd middle school should not be a primary consideration as the committee charges forward in November to think about middle school pairings. All right, so we have 4 different middle school scenarios to share with you tonight. And I realized, and we certainly did after Monday's meeting, that it's hard to get your arms around this concept. So my advice to you is to share with us after my presentation whatever you can about your thoughts about middle schools, and know that if you're really interested in middle schools, the committee will have 2 meetings in November where they'll dive deep into the middle school question. In each of the 4 scenarios that we have here tonight, Park would always feed Glacier Creek and not be split between Glacier Creek and Cromrie. Kind of makes geographic sense, right? Elm Lawn, Northside, and Sauk Trail would feed only Cromrie, so they wouldn't be split. Again, geographically, it stands to some reason. The questions then are, which middle schools should students from Pope Farm, Sunset Ridge, and West Middleton feed? And which of these 3 elementary schools should feed students to both of the middle schools? So which should feed both middle schools? Should it be, here are the candidates. Should it be Sunset Ridge? Sunset Ridge has the biggest attendance area geographically. Parts of that attendance area are much closer to Cromrie than to Glacier Creek. Some are in the city of Middleton, as a matter of fact. So that's one candidate. Or should it be West Middleton that feeds both middle schools? The West Middleton attendance area in all of the options has a fairly discernible east half and west half. So could it be that the east half goes to Cromrie and the west half goes to Glacier Creek? Okay, that's one potential scenario. Or should it be Pope Farm? That's the elementary school that has some of its students going to one middle school and some to the other. We know that geographic area that is being created for Pope Farm already has some students that go to Cromrie and some students that go to Glacier Creek because of that Sauk Trail assignment right next door. So can we craft a scenario there where part of it, maybe it's the north part goes to Cromrie and the south part goes to Glacier Creek, or some other combination, east-west, that would allow that to happen? Or should we think even further outside the box and maybe create a situation where for students from both Pope Farm and West Middleton go to 2 different elementary schools? That might provide an opportunity for fewer shifts in where kids go to middle school than the other 3 above it. But we'd have smaller groups from each elementary school going to each middle school, potentially some additional busing challenges. So there's pros and cons associated with thinking about that. We have in the back of the room at each of these stations a graphic like this. Please do not intend to read this. It's got too much information on it. What it does show you is what in each of these 4 concepts that I laid out, which elementary school would go to which middle school. So you can study that in the tables in the back of the room and look up at the maps and tell us whether you think one of the 4 of these different scenarios works better or worse relative to that elementary option that it's paired with. Again, there's a lot of information. Perry's going to talk about the forms. There's a lot of information about middle schools you could fill in to help us. Initial impressions are great. You don't have to stay on script with filling out that form. I was going to turn it back to Perry, but he went in exactly the opposite direction. Perry's going to close by talking about the next steps here this evening and after this evening to continue to be a participant in the process.
Are these slides available online?
These slides are available online. I don't know if they're there yet, but they will be very shortly.
This presentation is not, I wanted to wait until we were done tonight. But, for those of you, and I know there's a lot of you who go to the district website for this, every piece of material that the people spend 2 nights a month for 2.5 hours at each of those things. We had thousands of people who wanted to participate. No, we had about 35. And we narrowed that group down to 25. And just because I've had some questions over the last few weeks, like where do they represent, the goal was to have every elementary school have at least 1 representative. And that is true. There's anywhere from 1 to 4 for each of the elementary schools. When we began this process, we didn't know how Mark was going to divide up the neighborhoods. We know we have a lot of neighborhoods, but we didn't know, so we didn't ask that question. But again, we have a cross-representation of a lot of neighborhoods, but the reality is with 78, we don't have 78 neighborhoods on the committee. I just want to make that perfectly clear. But they have put in more than 30 hours just at meetings alone, and that doesn't count the amount of time they spend looking at the materials ahead of time, reading feedback. So again, I would appreciate it if you would give the members who are here a round of applause, because this has not been easy for them. The other person I want to acknowledge who's here tonight and is our board president, Bob Green. Because Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think of the 12 meetings you've been at, 11 of them, and the only one you missed was because you had a special board session that night. So I give the board a lot of credit. They have, over the last few years, we are a district that tries to involve our community. And that takes time and it takes effort, but we did it through the facility planning process, which I think is one reason why the referendums have had so much support the last few years, and we did it through this process. And again, that's a credit to the board. So we had quite a few board members there Monday night, but again, I just wanted to acknowledge Bob, because again, Bob comes to a lot of these things and it takes up time. So the way this works from here is that back on 3 blue chairs, way back where Jose is right now looking, you're gonna find separate forms. And a yellowish orange one, my eyesight's not very good, that's for option A1, a purple one for option D 3.1, and a green one for option D 3.7. I saw some of you grab pens on the way in. Hopefully everybody has something to write with. We want your feedback. We really do. So please, over the course of the next hour and 15 minutes, I'll tell you where you can go to get more answers, you get questions answered, or just talk. But please fill these out. And like I said, if you don't want to do it tonight, please make sure you turn it in before November 1st so we can share that feedback with the committee. So the way we've got the exterior of the room set up, and again, it's different for each middle school, is I'm going to be over by the gymnasium with option A1 for people who want to ask questions or talk over there. Straight back will be Lori Ames. She's got her hands up. Raise one hand, Lori, again. So thank you. So she's going to be straight behind where she is right now with option D 3.1. And then back from Paris, after a couple of days away from meetings, is Sherry Syra. She won't speak French to you, but she's going to handle option D 3.7. The 3 of us attend all these meetings as well, so we're familiar with what the committee, their thought processes, and what they've done. The committee members are going to go around, and their job tonight, and just like it was Monday night, is to listen. They want to listen to what people have to say. That's why they're here. That's why they're here Monday. So they're going to hear you even before you turn in those forms. Then in addition, if you have questions, like if you're not sure what neighborhood you're in, Colette will be able to answer that for you. She's right back there. She just waved her hand. She will also, if you've got questions about enrollment projections, because we've had questions like how, particularly where we're seeing a lot of growth, how did you come up with that? Mark and Colette will take care of those for you. I didn't see anybody from transportation here tonight. So again, Lori might be able to answer those questions, but if you've got specific questions about those that we can't answer, write them down. We want to make sure we get all this information to the committee. And then finally, Jose is still here. If anybody does need translation, again, let him know. If we only have like one person who does like we did Monday night, he can kind of walk around with that person or family. If it's more than that, we'll probably set him up separately so that way, and then Dana or somebody else will be there to be able to help with questions that way. Lastly, the person who couldn't be here tonight, who's been a part of this entire process, his name is Drew Howick. And Drew and Mark kind of do a traveling road show. They work together a lot. And one of the things that really impressed me that Drew said, and he serves as the facilitator. I mean, to be honest, this is a process that we in the district don't go through very often, as I mentioned at the beginning. But one of the things Drew said is he reminded everybody there, again, what I said at the beginning. We understand this is hard. I mean, you can tell by looking at the body language that I know that this isn't fun. And for those of you who have heard from me, the hard part is when I have to write to all of you, students will be changing schools. Because I know you'd all like to keep your child at the school they're at unless they're going to Polk Farm. I get it. But again, as Mark pointed out, that doesn't solve those issues with Sauk Trail and Sunset Ridge. And I also think, I'll add one other thing. For those of you who are at one of those other schools that's at like 99% capacity or higher because we didn't do anything to address those things, you wouldn't be happy either with that. So it can be a painful process. I'm not going to sit here and minimize it, but it's something we have to do. And we're hoping we come up with a solution that lasts for a long time. If it can last another 23 years, that'd be great. No promises, but again, we're hoping this takes care of it for a while. Okay? I think with that, we're good with the presentation. Again, Please make sure you grab one form apiece. I guess one last thing I should remind you. We're not asking for your names on these forms, but we are asking for your neighborhood. We do want to filter it by that thing. So, and I guess once I start talking, I don't give up the microphone, sorry. But one other thing I want to validate is that I know that there are some neighborhoods that have provided a lot of feedback and have a lot of representation here tonight. There are other neighborhoods that are much smaller. And I know their concern is one of, is our voice being heard the same as those other neighborhoods? And I think that's a valid question. And all I can tell you is the committee's been told the goal is to find the best solution. Regardless, we want to hear all the feedback, but it's not about the noise, if that makes sense. It's about the quality of the feedback. Okay? And I think a lot of you who've emailed me have heard that as well. All right? Thank you for coming.